Student exchange programs. They're supposed to be, well, the opportunity of a lifetime. Who wouldn't want the chance to travel halfway around the world, experience a new country, a new culture, a new school, make new friends for life? That's the way it's supposed to happen. But it didn't at the University of Waterloo recently. In fact, a few months ago, the worst possible thing happened. And here to help us understand the story and see what lessons we can learn from it, we're joined now by Jeff Casello. He's professor of transportation at the University of Waterloo. Jeff, it's good to have you in here again.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
We are going to start by telling a very tragic human story, and then we're going to broaden out and see if there aren't some policy implications based on the story. I want you to tell me, first of all, about Amélie Limburger, who was a transfer student from Germany to your part of the province.
So about 3 years ago now, some colleagues and I in Germany got together, started talking about learning about transportation. They're world leaders in Karlsruhe, a city there, about 300,000 with 350 kilometers of light rail, just a fabulous place to be. And our students got to know each other. Over the summer, 6 of my grad students went to Karlsruhe to study with Christoph Hupfer, who was going to join us but couldn't be able to be with us today. Amélie was one of those students who my students met there in Germany. Amélie and another student came to Canada to study this fall along with 6 German colleagues. We did some joint workshops, and on October 25th, we got the unbelievable news that Amélie had lost her life in a tragic accident in Uptown Waterloo.
What happened?
The best we can put the story back together is that Amélie was looking to cross King Street in Uptown Waterloo. Apparently she could see to her right that there were people still crossing. Thought for a moment that it was safe. There was a car stopped in the nearest lane towards her, so she was able to walk past that car. And as she passed that car, there was another car coming through the intersection at normal speed, and the accident occurred and she didn't survive. So just an absolute tragedy.
How old was she?
She was 23.
23, studying?
Studying civil engineering transportation.
And she was supposed to be here for how long?
She would be here for the term, so through December. But just a woman who was full of life, had already traveled lots of North America, seen most of Western Canada, had plans to visit Montreal and out east when her exchange was done. Just, you know, all of the things you can say about a woman of that age, and with so much personality and so much individual characteristic, and lost to this accident.
How did you break the news to whomever you had to break the news to over there?
Yeah, I'm not well versed in this, and I don't know that I'm well put together for this. I'm not sure who is, but I got a call from Waterloo Regional Police trying to get next of kin information. They wouldn't tell me at that time what had happened with Amélie, except that she was in a serious accident. Then Twitter exploded, and other news feeds exploded that there was a fatality in Uptown Waterloo. Some of my students who knew Amélie well had put the information together. I gathered everybody up. We went to Amélie's home, where there's another student, Kirsten, who's also visiting for the term. They were really close. We got everybody together, and I had to share the news. It was one of the hardest things I've had to do.
Did you call her parents?
I didn't. The university did. We have a colleague, Chris Reed, who looks after these things at the university, but that call had to be made, and I can't imagine how difficult that would have been to make the call, but more so to receive it.
Has there been any suggestion that the program ought to be canceled now as a result, or anything like that?
You know, quite the opposite. Everybody who's participated realizes the importance of making these exchanges. It's a tragic incident, but we hope it's an isolated incident, and everybody is really supportive of trying to learn and exchange ideas across countries, and across languages, across. We had a memorial for Amélie just last Saturday, and it was really, I hope, healing for so many people who were part of it. And one of the things I said at that event was these exchanges are about learning about professional things, but they're more than that. They're about learning language and culture and society and friendships and so many things. And I think we all see the value in that despite the tragedy. So we'll hopefully have this continue and grow.
It is not uncommon, I don't have to tell you, that it is often death that focuses people in a way that nothing else does. And so this tragedy is going to raise a lot of questions for a lot of people about transportation policy, about how we share the road among pedestrians and cars and cyclists and skateboarders and streetcars and people who have a physical disability and need to get around in a scooter and all of that kind of stuff. If we come to the province of Ontario, I think you sent me a report which showed that for the year 2010, 95 people were killed in what the coroner calls preventable accidents. What's a preventable accident?
Any accident is preventable. That's the key thing. And I think that there's a whole realm of responsibility to be taken here. You know, I'm an engineer by my training. I've designed roadways. I'm also now working in the School of Planning at the University of Waterloo. So those two fields clearly are key to this. It's designing and planning for facilities that give drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, everyone the right information. And we could talk a lot about what that means. But it's also about individuals. It's about, in Amelie's case, she walked into traffic really and inexplicably really just made bad judgment. And a victim that we haven't talked about is the person who hit Amelie. He's a 23-year-old man who hasn't been identified, thankfully. I don't think he needs the added pressure. But he's clearly a victim. His life has changed from this accident. And I think the responsibility boils down to everyone, to people who are in their car, people who are walking, people who are cycling, people who are on transit. We all have to take responsibility for protecting ourselves and protecting those who are around us.
Is it possible, as you've studied these things, to make a blanket statement that it is usually X who is at fault in these matters?
No. In fact, if you look at those coroner's reports, if you look at the cyclist accidents, they look at who they consider to be at fault in these accidents. And there were 129 deaths that they looked at. 1/3 or so were the fault of the cyclist because of their behavior. 1/3 was the fault of the driver because of their behavior. And 1/3 was really joint fault. It was two people, one who was driving, one who was riding a cycle, who just didn't pay enough attention to their surroundings. And one thing that's exploded in the last 2 or 3 years is everybody's got their headphones in. Everybody's on the phone, everybody's texting. We're busy and we all want to be connected all the time. But this is incredibly dangerous. We have to really be aware of our surroundings and just take care of yourself and try and make sure that you're safe and others around you are safe.
I think we've seen YouTube video of people who are texting as they're walking through crosswalks and actually getting struck by cyclists or vehicles or something like that. Is there any indication that Amelie was doing that?
We understand, and I'm not 100% sure, that she may have had headphones in, but that's the only thing that she was doing while the accident occurred.
Here's some more stats from the survey that you gave me. Estimates are 26,000 people visited hospital in Ontario for cycling accidents in 2009. 26,000.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the cost, imagine the heartbreak in a lot of those cases. I want to put up the picture. Christoph, you mentioned earlier that Christoph was going to join us, your counterpart from Germany, and through some technical issues he couldn't. But if we've got that picture that he sent, let's put that up. Now this is in his, I gather in his...
yeah, this is Casello in Germany, and so it's central western Germany, not far from the French border. But this,
what jumps out at you there?
The amazing thing here, and I actually took this photo in Casello with Christoph, as we look at that picture, the amazing thing is that everybody there is doing their own thing. Some are cycling, some are walking, some are coming on transit. This is an auto-free zone in the core of Casello, so there's no cars in this picture. But everybody is cognizant of what's happening, and I think that for this system to work, everybody has to be aware of what's going on. And this system couldn't work if people weren't paying a lot of attention. And I think you can see in that picture, that people have just become accustomed and comfortable with that situation, but it's been careful.
I got to tell you, I saw something completely different. Can we put the picture up again? I want to put the picture up again. I want to tell you what my first impression was. Those cyclists aren't wearing helmets.
Okay.
They're cutting across streetcar tracks where, I think the door's open, so they're not going to get run over, but I wondered whether that was at all dangerous. You want to speak to that?
I think you could sit there, and I have sat in that square for 30 minutes and just watch this happen. And what happens, Steve, is these people have grown up with that streetcar. Those people who are traveling without helmets, they've cycled in that area since they were 4 by themselves or with their parents. And they just know the rules. And it's an agreed upon, conscientious, safe place for people to travel. And it works. I'm telling you, the accident rate in that square is probably, and I don't know the data, but it's probably 1/10 of what you would find on a crosstown streetcar route in Toronto, because people are accustomed to it.
Okay. As we consider what we need to do to try to get those fatality numbers much lower, ideally to 0.
Right.
Let's go through some of the options here. Do we need new laws?
We do. We need some thoughts around the way we legislate things. And I think what we've done and what's been really unhealthy is in many cities we've talked about the war on the car. Here in Toronto, we've had that exact language coming from the mayor's office, and we've had people who are, really critical of the car, that the car is all evil and so on, and that's not sensible. What we need is constant, judicious, well thought out legislation that allows streets to function for all users, and that's the complete street movement. And the idea of this is, If 60 kilometers an hour is the maximum you want people to travel on a roadway, then we really have to enforce that. But at the same time, we should think, does 60 or 50 make sense? Because you asked me earlier, is there one thing that contributes to all of these deaths? And the one answer I should have said is speed. That's right.
Always,
because if you get hit at 40 kilometers an hour, you're much more likely to survive than if you get hit at 60 kilometers an hour.
So photo radar on every major intersection?
Well, you know, our own newspaper back at home has looked at red light cameras and whether or not they're effective. And what they found is there's lots of rear-ending because people are stopping when other people wouldn't expect them to as they come to red light cameras. So whatever we do legislatively has to come with education and has to come with social norms. I mean, all of these things have to change at once, but it has to be well thought out, conscientious, and has to be ubiquitous. I mean, what's happening now is people are taking sides, it's divisive, but it's not really smart, intelligent conversation about where we need to go.
Well, when you talk about new laws, the fact is we have a law that says mostly 50 kilometers an hour in the city.
Right.
So we don't need a new law there. We just need
enforce.
better enforcement in that case?
We need two things. We need better enforcement, and we also need to design better. Because if you put a roadway where the lanes are very wide and you can see a long distance and there are no interactions with pedestrians or cyclists, by definition, all of us are going to drive faster. I mean, it's just, so the engineering and the planning has to be done right so that the signals to the driver are correct so that they slow down. You know, it can be as easy as some rough pavement. So as you're driving, you hear the and all of a sudden you think to yourself, oh, this is a different scenario. I shouldn't be traveling at the same speed I was before. I mean, it's as easy as that.
More stoplights?
Stoplights, yes and no. Stoplights, what we find is that when you stop traffic artificially, then people tend to violate those stop signs and people will actually speed up quite a lot leaving those stop signs. So by having them create sort of a dangerous situation. So where appropriate, but there's simple things, narrowing lanes, bulbing out curbs so the pedestrians have shorter distances to travel. And when you're driving yourself, if you're coming to a place where the intersection is more narrow, you just slow down because that's your normal reaction. So there's lots of simple things that could be done really quickly that would improve pedestrian and cycling safety.
One of the things I see frequently on the sidewalks, we're here at Yonge and Eglinton, middle of Toronto, very busy intersection. The scooters that seniors or people who have trouble walking, they're on the sidewalks, and some of them travel at a pretty quick clip.
Yeah.
Anything need to be done about that?
I think a more problematic case is the cyclist on the sidewalk. So, you know, what happens is you're a cyclist, you get on your bike, and maybe you are not an ardent cyclist, you are a casual bicyclist. You're really just riding your bike that day. And you go out in the roadway, people are traveling 70 kilometers an hour adjacent to you, and there's high volume. You don't feel comfortable, right? And so you default to the sidewalk. But then you're traveling at 15 kilometers an hour, someone's walking at 4, and that speed difference becomes problematic as well. I mean, we see lots of seniors who are involved in accidents between pedestrians and bikes, and they can be very dangerous as well. So the problem is that we tell cyclists you can't ride on the sidewalk, but then we don't give them a viable alternative, so they default to the sidewalk. So again, it's about the design and the planning and the engineering to make sure that this street is viable for anybody who wishes to use it.
You were telling me earlier before we started taping here that you met Eleanor McMahon the other day. She's been on this program, and Eleanor has created an organization called Share the Road, and for all of the reasons we're talking about today. Her husband was an OPP officer, was cycling, hit by a trucker with an expired driver's license or maybe a license that had been taken away, I can't remember right now, and killed. That notion of sharing the road, do we talk enough about that?
We don't. This is where we fall down. You know, again, about the divisiveness and against cars versus transit versus bikes, this is not helpful at all. If you look at what's happening around the world, there's two things that are happening. We're really moving to segregating modes where we have cars are in a defined area, cyclists are in a defined area, pedestrians are in a defined area, and people respect and acknowledge those things.
Is that the way to go?
And that's one way, and it can work very well. The other way is to break down all the boundaries between the modes. And so if you go to downtown Kitchener, the next time you're there, look, and you'll see that King Street, there really is no curbs because the cyclists, the pedestrians, and the cars obviously dominate in the lanes, but there's no real division between the modes there. And what it forces cars to do is to slow down. So you can't make it through downtown Kitchener at faster than 30 kilometers an hour because there's always something going on and it forces you to be aware of what's going on. So two really very different fundamental theories of how you manage. And I think both have their applications. You know, downtown Kitchener it works. I think if you went out here to Yonge and Eglinton and you narrowed the lanes and you took down the curbs and you had all the pedestrian activity that you do, it would work. In other places where you have a little bit lower pedestrian volumes that you want the road to function with higher speeds, then the segregation model works. So you have to, you know, use some judgment around that, and that's where, you know, what we're trying to teach our contemporary engineers.
Let me ask a third option. I'm from Hamilton. Downtown Hamilton, filled with one-way streets. And the stoplights are all synchronized,
Yeah.
which means you can fly
Yep.
if you're in a car
Really
through the main streets of
problematic.
Toronto.
Really
You don't like that?
No, because what ends up happening is they get synchronized for 40 kilometers an hour, but if you do the math, you can show that 80 kilometers an hour will actually synchronize as well. So you give people an incentive to speed, and what tends to happen is they have no motivation, drivers have no motivation to pay attention to things that are going on around them because they know they're just going to continually arrive at green, right? So it takes away. If there's one message that we can get out about this, it is about being aware. Aware when you're walking, aware when you're cycling, aware when you're driving. That text that you just got or you want to send, and I'm not just talking about the driver who's texting, I'm talking about the person who's walking who's texting. That can wait, because if you look up for a quarter of a second, you can very much save your or somebody else's life. And I think that's the takeaway message. I mean, I think if Eleanor were here, she would tell exactly that same message about protecting cyclists on streets, just being aware. And from a design perspective, putting cyclists and putting pedestrians in the vision of drivers is so important. That's one really important thing.
We apparently have some technical wizards in our control room
Okay.
because I am told that Christoph Hupfer, the professor of the University of Applied Sciences in Karlsruhe, Germany, is with us now. And Christoph, I see you now. Auf Deutschland, wie geht's heute?
Sehr gut, vielen Dank. Und selbst?
Ich bin gut auch. Okay, thank you very much for joining us, and we're glad we could do this. Jeff, as you know, has we've already had a probably 15, 20-minute conversation on some of the issues, so let me just go back a bit and get your side of things. When you started this exchange program in the first place, where we would send students to you, you would send students to us, tell me about Amélie, who was one of the people who came over here and, of course, tragically died in that accident.
Emily was one of our students in a master program in civil engineering, and she was focused on transportation engineering, and so it was a great pleasure, and she eager to go to Canada, and to do some studies and some additional education in transportation. So.
And Christoph, have you seen her parents since?
23 years old, and yes, I think that can. Sorry.
Have you seen her parents?
She studied at first in the bachelor program, and it was the second term of her master program, and she went to Waterloo to do one term off, so one term in Waterloo.
Have you managed to speak to her parents yet?
Yes, we have had a joint memorial, and so we talked to her parents, and they said to us that is their wish that we continue in this program. That it is a great chance to go to Canada, to go abroad, and learn about different cultures, different ways to do things, to see things, to do civil engineering, and of course to do transportation engineering.
You know, it would be easy for her parents to say, we entrusted our daughter with you and your program, and she's not coming home. And they would legitimately feel extremely embittered about this. Have they felt that way?
No, they didn't. So, because I think the reason of the tragedy is not that she went to Canada. So it's a tragedy. It's a traffic accident, and so we have the same kind of accident in Germany. So it's handling the safety of the pedestrian and the cyclist. So this is what we have to focus on.
Christoph, I once spoke to a police officer here in Toronto, and I used the word accident when I was talking about some car pileup, some crash up on the side of the road. And he corrected me. He said, there's no such thing as an accident. It's just bad planning, or it's people not paying attention, that kind of thing. Is that right?
I think sometimes it's right. So if you go to the situation Emily was involved in, so she was waiting at the curb, and a bus stopped right close to her, and maybe she thought that it's a stop signal for the car traffic, and this means that this is green for the pedestrian, so it's able to she was able to cross in a safe situation. So her estimation of risk fails. Then she crossed the street, and there were no view on the other traffic, no view on the second lane, for example. And the car driver didn't have any chance to see that Emily crosses the street. So it's a kind of a trap, and I think this is engineering work. This is a question of road design.
A question of, okay, understood, road design. Jeff, I should give you a chance to say hi, because you guys know each other, obviously, and have worked on this stuff together.
So
Hi,
hi, Christoph. Nice to see you from across the ocean here. I'm glad that Skype is finally functioning for us.
Do you two, at this point, what do you do?
Yeah.
You've got this program in place.
Right.
You've got this tragedy you've got to overcome.
Yep.
You've got some progress on an issue that you want to make.
Right.
What do you do together now?
So the first thing you think when this happens is, how do you comfort the people who are closest to Amelie, her family, and our students? And then the next question is, what good can come of this horrible tragedy? What can we do? And so Christoph and I are already planning for an analysis of this area in Uptown Waterloo to see what the design and the planning improvements that are possible in that area. But we're also thinking about the next kind of traffic safety question. And Christoph has been working with colleagues in Montreal, so this next summer we'll get everybody in Montreal to look at pedestrian and traffic safety, where the issues are just the same as they are in Toronto or in Waterloo. And so, you know, this is really what we do, and this is what we're passionate about, and we try to share that passion with our students. And when you lose one of the students in an area that you're so passionate about, it just gives you more motivation to try and be louder, have a louder voice, to try and make changes that are going to prevent these kinds of things from happening in the future.
Christoph, let me ask you the same thing. What do you do now at this point?
I think we have a joint project, and we have a plan to do some things together. So we have the same traffic safety issues in Germany. We have the same traffic issues in Montreal, in Ottawa, in Toronto, in Waterloo. And the thing is, in fact, that we have to focus on the traffic safety of the vulnerable road users. And this means that, so for example, you put signs on the crossings, pedestrian obey your signal. It sounds a little bit because I'm your dad or because I'm your mom. So it's you can translate it to because I'm your rat. So we know that pedestrians pay less attention to the traffic signals, and so we have to come to a design regarding to the traffic behavior of the pedestrians and the cyclists. And this is an engineering issue, and I think we will have some joint activities regarding to that issue.
And let me ask each of you one last question. Christoph, to you first. There are people who really need to be focused on this issue, who need to be seized of this issue. Politicians who make the laws, the police who enforce the laws, traffic engineers such as yourselves, transportation planning people, the public. Do you think that that group of people is adequately focused or seized of this issue right now?
No, I don't think so. It seems that the focus is on car traffic, on traffic flow, velocity, and go really fast from A to B or something like that. But in traffic, we are a kind of a community, so we have to look for each other, and we have to focus on the vulnerable road users more than we do at present.
Okay, and Jeff, you follow up on that as well? Are people focused adequately here?
Yeah, I think that this is the issue. And, you know, whenever something terrible like this happens, you get a big spike in awareness, and then little by little it fades away until the next incident. And what we're really trying to do is bang the drum as loudly as we can and make, in effect, important changes. You know, that's what Eleanor's organization does, and that's what we're trying to do it from an educational point of view. But now, you know, making as much noise as we can about this and really trying to make changes.
Bang the drum, share the road.
That's the
Sound like good ideas.
Plan, sure.
I'm so glad we could get you connected, Christoph. Christoph Hupfer from the University of Applied Sciences in Karlsruhe, Germany. Guten Abend, mein Freund, and auf Wiedersehen.
Take care.
Okay, until next time. And Jeff Casello from the University of Waterloo. We're so glad you could make the trip into Toronto as well.
Well, thanks for having us, Steve.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.